Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama was born in the 5th or 6th century BC in Lumbini, in modern-day Nepal. Siddhartha is a Sanskrit name meaning, one who has accomplished a goal. And Gautama is a family name. His father King Suddhodana was the leader of a large clan called the Shakya, or Sakya. He married Princess Maya Devi, who was the daughter of King Superbuddha, who ruled the state of Devdaha in ancient India, Rupandehi district in Terai region of Nepal. Maya Devi was a very virtuous and talented princess apart from her great beauty. Before being born in the human world, a bodhisattva has to consider 5 major factors regarding his birth. They were: whether the time was right for him to be born as a human, which continent he should choose to be born as a human, which state he should choose to be born as a human, which caste he should choose to be born as a human, and who he should choose as his mother. After contemplating these 5 factors carefully, our Gautama Bodhisattva chose Queen Maya Devi as his mother. On an Esala full moon day in July, Gautama Bodhisattva entered his mother's womb. As an indication of this great event, Queen Maya Devi dreamt of a white elephant carrying a white lotus flower circling her bed thrice, and entering her stomach from the right side. The wise men, Brahmins, of the court confirmed that the dream was an indication of the birth of a great being to the royal couple. Queen Maya Devi traveled to her parents' home in Devdaha for her first confinement. She was taken in a great procession with thousands of attendants. On the way she stopped at Lumbini, Terai plains of southern Nepal, which was a beautiful and shady grove of sal trees, Shoria robusta, to admire the surroundings and rest a while. It was the Wesak full moon day, and the queen got labor pains and gave birth to a baby boy under a sal tree. Legend has it that this baby walked 7 steps as soon as he was born on the ground. Each step was welcomed by a lotus flower which sprouted from the earth. While standing on the last lotus, he proclaimed to the world that he would be the greatest and the noblest being on the earth, and that this would be his last birth. The procession which took Maya Devi to her parents turned back, and returned to Kapilavastu with the newborn baby. King Suddhodana received them halfway with great joy. Learning of the birth, sage Acosta, who was the teacher of King Suddhodana, visited the king's palace the following day. When the king brought his son close to the sage, the baby's feet rested on the sage's head on its own accord. Acosta, understanding the significance of the incident, put his hands together and worshipped the baby, laughing. And then he started to weep. When the king asked for the meaning of his action, the sage said that he laughed because this infant would definitely become the Enlightened One, the Buddha. He had cried because by that time, he would not be in the human world to hear the Buddha's preachings. Hearing this, King Suddhodana too worshipped his son for the first time, on the 5th day after the baby was born. The king invited 5 renowned Brahmins for the naming ceremony. After examining the marks on the body of the infant, 4 of them said that if the prince chooses to stay in the lay life, if he chooses to follow a religious life, he would become the Enlightened One, the Buddha. The youngest of the 5 Brahmins, Khandana, firmly said that the baby would become the Enlightened One, nothing else. Since the newborn would do a lot of good to the world either way, he was given the name Siddhartha, meaning the person who would do good to the world. Since his tribal name was Gautama, the prince was called Siddhartha Gautama. After 7 days of Prince Siddhartha's birth, Queen Maya Devi passed away and was born in thus of the heaven as the mother god. The infant prince was brought up by his mother's sister, Prajapati Gautami, who became the consort of King Suddhodana after Maya Devi's death. On the 5th month of Prince Siddhartha, the royal sowing feast was held at the royal paddy fields. The baby prince too was taken to the fields and was kept in a tent under a tree. The attendants came out of the tent to watch the feast. After a while, when they peeped inside the tent to see whether the baby was all right, they were astonished to see him meditating. The king was informed of this, and for the 2nd time, King Suddhodana paid reverence to his son. King Suddhodana gave all the comforts in life to his son abundantly, and a good education as fitting to a king. Prince Siddhartha learned everything very fast. and even his relatives were doubtful of his learning ability since it was too brief. The prince had to prove his skills to them in a public demonstration, which won him his consort Princess Yasodhara, a cousin of his. His father did everything in his power to prevent his son being attracted towards a religious life. He prohibited the old, sick and the yellow-robed ascetics from wandering in the city, and display of dead bodies and funeral processions, because the astrologers had said that the prince would embrace a religious life after seeing those four sights. The king gave his son 3 great palaces suitable for the 3 seasons called Ramya, Sharmaya, and Subha. They were full of riches and beautiful. Talented young women sang and danced all day long to provide pleasure to the prince. Most of his young life, the prince was confined to those palaces. But one day, overcome with curiosity, Prince Siddhartha asked a charioteer to take him on a series of rides through the countryside. The prince hard-pressed his faithful attendant Channa, who was following the king's instructions to the letter, and prevented the prince from going outside the city walls alone all these years, to take him out of the city. All the visits to the outside of the city by the prince had been pre-planned before. Channa knew he was in great danger if the king knew. But after much deliberation, he took the prince outside the city walls, and for the first time, the prince saw an old person trudging on the road pathetically. The prince learned from Channa that everybody would become old one day. On Prince Siddhartha's next visit outside the walls of the city, he encountered a sick person who was lamenting with pain, and learned from Channa that everybody gets sick one time or another. The prince encountered a funeral on his 3rd visit outside the city gates, and learned that everybody dies and it is inevitable. On his 4th visit outside the city, he saw a yellow-robed ascetic walking calmly with his head bent. From Channa he learnt that those are the ones who have renounced the lay life for a peaceful living, rid of all worldly desires, seeking to end suffering in the world. This explanation captivated the prince immensely. He was in great thoughts on the way back when he learned that his wife had given birth to a son. Hearing the news, the prince uttered, "A Rahula was born, bringing an attachment to life." Hearing his son's words from others, King Suddhodana named his grandson Rahula. The prince entered the palace to the music and dancing of the court women, but he was not interested in them anymore. He fell asleep contemplating about the reality of life. When he suddenly woke up at midnight, he saw the reality much better. All the young beauties who were entertaining him from the previous night have fallen asleep all over the place. Some were groaning and snoring. Some were discharging saliva. Some were half naked, and some were grinding their teeth in sleep. The prince then and there made up his mind to depart the lay life and go in search of deliverance. He just sneaked a quick look at his newborn son, who was sleeping cuddled to his mother, and walked out of the palace with Channa and his well-trained horse Kanthaka, never to return to the comfortable palace life. Prince Siddhartha was 29 years old, and it was an Estala full moon day. This is called the Great Renunciation, since he left all the worldly comforts and riches to find the end of suffering, which was a very difficult task. He spent 6 years seeking out teachers and trying various ascetic practices to gain enlightenment. Unsatisfied with the results, he meditated beneath the Bodhi tree, where after temptations by Mara, he realized the 4 noble truths and achieved enlightenment. At Sarnath he preached his first sermon to his companions, outlining the Eightfold Path, which offered a middle way between self-indulgence and self-mortification and led to the liberation of nirvana. The 5 ascetics who heard this sermon became not only his first disciples, but also arhats who would enter nirvana upon death. His mission fulfilled. The Buddha died after eating a meal that may accidentally have contained spoiled pork, and escaped the cycle of rebirth. His body was cremated and stupas were built over his relics.